All right, take two. I tried to do this exact video that I'm about to do yesterday. I think it was probably about like an hour and 15 long. Used like the tiermaker.com website, and it didn't record at all. So we'll see. Hopefully this is being recorded, and hopefully you're seeing this on the Cerebral Football channel. Um, so what this video is going to be, it's going to be grading every team's performance at Euro 2024. But we're not grading every team at the same exact standard. France is at a higher standard than Slovakia, right? It's about how teams matched up to their expectations going into the tournament. It's more so how I would grade the team's performance if I was a member of that country's FA. I think that's the best way to describe it, but I think it makes sense. So, without further ado, we'll get straight into it with Group A, fourth place. So we start with Scotland. I think that outside of the first game, they gave a good performance. You know, tough to start with Germany and lose in that way, and then obviously it's tough to come back from that. You're down 4 goal differential. Late loss to Hungary, and let's see. I'm not sure. I don't. Did they? They got out of there with a point. They got a tie versus Switzerland. Um, and I think they played really well actually in the game against Switzerland. The coaching was good that Scott McTominay was able to go ahead and pick up Xhaka. And throughout the tournament, I think that was the best performance anybody had against Switzerland was this Scottish performance. So hats off to McTominay. Um, but they've gone out of the group with 1 point, and it was a team that, yeah, they didn't have the greatest expectations, but a lot of fans went to the tournament, and I think they would have been really expecting that this was the year that they could make it out of the group stage. And I think going into the tournament, at least, it looked like a very doable group to do it in. And then you start in the fashion that you do, 5-1 loss. The goal differential really hurts there, and you end up being one of, if not the worst team in the tournament. Let's see. Yeah, they end up being the worst team in the tournament statistically. If at all points were together, so it's hard to give them a decent grade, especially even though I'm sure expectations weren't too high going into the tournament. Um, you know, I've gone with a D minus for them, and I think that's fair. Honestly, I didn't want to give them an F because I do think that against Switzerland and against Hungary, they showed some heart and they've played really well, specifically defensively. But in those two games, they had very little going forward, and then you get hammered by Germany, and you go out with 1 point and a -5 goal differential. No matter how well you play on the field in that situation, it's not going to be a happy tournament. So a D minus is what I've gone with for them. For Hungary, I thought they were a potential dark horse going into the tournament, and looking at how well they performed in qualifying, I think obviously Szoboszlai is the main man for them, but there was this sense that they're a very like team first program, and everybody was bought into this like team dynamic, and I really thought that they had an identity and an organization going into the tournament, which to some extent you could say you saw against Switzerland in the second half. And for points against Germany, I don't think it showed up really against Scotland because I think Scotland's defensive style won out in that game. But second half against Switzerland, they looked really good. Um, but they came out slow in the first half, go down 2-0, lose the first game by 2 goals. It's hard to come back from 2-0 after a first half when you've played like that, no matter how well you play in the second. So they turn it around, but they still can't get the result. And then from there, you have to play the toughest team in your group. You take another loss there. You're going into the final day with no points, and you've got a tough defensive team in Scotland. As soon as that first half didn't go Hungary's way, they were in trouble. The schedule of the group was not built in a way that gave them a good chance for success, particularly if they got off to a slow start, and they did. And in the end, that's what hurts them. I don't think it's a tournament that they'll be happy with, but I also don't think it's a tournament that they will be extremely disappointed in. They'll be happy that they got there. They'll be happy about their qualifying. They're not going to forget about those things just because the tournament didn't go exactly how they wanted. And I think that they will see that there's room for improvement, and that this will be a motivator to keep working. And I do think that they will be pushing for a spot for the World Cup in 2026. But that being said, with the level of expectation going into the tournament being as it was, and them not qualifying for the knockout round, despite finishing in third place, I've gone for a C minus for them. I think they did. C is obviously like meets expectations, right? Kind of. It's the average. And I think they did a little bit below. If you let's say you simulated this tournament 100 times, right? I think that the result that Hungary got is below what their average result in this tournament would have been. So C minus. We go to Switzerland, and I don't really. Wow, this is a blurry photo. I don't really feel like I have too much to say before I talk about the grade. It's an A plus for me. Going into the turn, I think they exceeded all expectations. They've gone to a quarterfinal, and in my opinion, they've outplayed England in the quarterfinal. Unlucky to not get the win there. Xhaka, absolutely brilliant performance, and they were a team that I kind of thought were aging out. I didn't think that and there were a lot of teams like that in this tournament. Croatia, Denmark, Belgium, a lot of teams like that where the guys are all on the older side. I don't know if they're going to perform at this tournament. And Switzerland really was the one who not only performed to their old standard but went above and beyond. I mean, they were a special team, one of the most fun teams to watch. Very, very, very well set up. Had a good identity. Their chemistry was very good. I think that Xhaka's relationship with his coach and his ability to go to his coach and say, "Hey, this is what I think we should be doing. It works at Leverkusen." I think that that's a game changer for this tournament because the way they played um, suited them really well. So I don't think that Xhaka just comes in and says, "Hey, I'm doing this thing at my club. It might work here." I think Xhaka comes in and he says, "I'm doing this thing at my club, and I think this team is built like my club. Let me try to explain this to you." And the coach hears and listens to him, and they build off of it and they create something successful. And I just think that's a positive environment all around. Getting to a quarterfinal, losing on penalties is tough, but in the end, really positive turn from them. And I hope that they continue to have this level of success and that in 2026 they're playing at the same level again. It'll be hard. Obviously, if I was considering, and a lot of people were considering that they could be aging out before this tournament, they might really be aging out by then. But this tournament, they went above and beyond expectations. They played attractive football. I think that the expectation for them probably would have been around a 16, and they're in a quarterfinal and honestly outplayed England and could have been going to a semifinal. And they played an attractive brand of football. So across the board, I think they check almost every box. So for me, it's an A plus, and I find very little. If I was a Swiss person, I would find very little to criticize in a realistic sense after this tournament. Yeah, obviously, there's always stuff to criticize, but you have to know your team. You have to know who's on your team. You have to know the talent that you have. And so I think criticizing this Swiss team for things that happen in this tournament would be ridiculous. So for me, it's an A plus. No flaws. Exceeds expectations. Great, awesome. Brings us to Germany, the last team in the group. I think that they had a great tournament, and to go out the way they did, very, very close game to Spain, where in overtime and at the end of the game they outplayed them and really could have gotten a win once Nico Williams and Lamine Yamal got subbed out for Spain. Just really special tournament. They dominated Spain once those two substitutions were made. They handled their group well, struggled against Switzerland, but that was a game they were already through to the next round. They struggled against Denmark to some extent, but they got the win, and that's what matters. And, I think when you look back at where Germany was as a team in October, having come off of 3 straight tournaments where they finished in third place, to say, all right, now they've finished first place in their group and they've gone to a quarterfinal And during the course of that tournament, they, beat a Danish side and went to overtime with a Spanish side who was near perfect for the course of the tournament. I think that it's a positive result when you look at it in terms of October, and where they were then, and how problematic the FA seemed to be then. But at the same time, you were the hosts, and this last year under Nagelsmann has been good. So it's not perfect. There are things to build on, but I think that's going to come with time. And I think by 2026, they'll be even better. I just think that, this was a tournament too soon for them. And so, like, it feels harsh not to give them a better grade. I'm going to give them an A minus. Feels, and I think they could get a higher grade than that, but I do know that there would be Germans who and people in the German FA who thought that they should have done better than this, and I don't think that's an unfair thing to think. I just think it's they could, but be patient. I think it's still to come. I think they're not. They just need a little bit more time. Just a little bit more time. It's not a matter of, oh, they blew their one chance. No, they're building something special here in Germany, and it's gonna be fun to watch for the future. Yeah. Although I will say, Tony Cruz leaving could be a detriment. They don't really have somebody to fill that spot that he's been playing, that Jacques has been playing, that Rodri's been playing, this new defensive midfielder playmaker type role that it's so prolific right now. Um, but they have all the other pieces. They have the box to box to connect Cruz to an attacking mid and Andrik. And yeah, Gundogan probably won't be around for too much longer either. But there's plenty of players off the bench, and Havertz could probably drop into that 10 position as well. So there's a lot of potential there for them. I think the only thing to be worried about going forward is, okay, can we find somebody to replace Tony Cruz? But honestly, I think Kimmich might be able to go into midfield and do that job to a pretty good standard, and fill in a right back then, and you're set. So not too much to worry about for Germany for me. I think Füllkrug should be the starter at 9, but I think Kai Havertz deserves respect for what he did in the tournament. He's not an out and out 9, but his hold up play is great, and he knows how to play with his back to goal and play with the ball at his feet. Rudiger, really good tournament. So I think all around for them, they had players who were really special in the tournament, which makes it like, yeah, we would have wanted to go further, but we had good performances across the board. We lost to the eventual champions. It's not a tremendously negative tournament. A minus, I feel, is fair. Going on to Group B, fourth place in Group B was Albania. I don't think many people would have expected them to do very well, or go very far. I think they finished last place with 1 point, and in all honesty, that might be just about what people expected them to do. Maybe people in their FA would have hoped for a little bit better. And at points, they played some decent football. I don't know about tactically, but there was heart and there was passion, and scoring a goal early against Italy and giving Spain a fight, even if it is their B team, and then obviously getting a tie with Croatia. They had results, so it's not a terrible tournament, but I do think that it wasn't great, and they don't have necessarily star power. Broja wasn't anything special, and I think that you know slightly below what Albanians would have realistically hoped for. There's not too much to say about them. I mean, um, 1 draw, 2 losses, 3 goals for, 5 against. They were there. That unfortunately, I feel like that's about all you can say for them. They scored an early goal, which was awesome, and that's about it. So for me, I've gone with a D plus. It's on the lower side of the grades, but it's hard to give somebody who finishes in fourth place with less than 3 points anything above a D. No matter what the expectations for them were going into the tournament. Fourth place in 9 times out of 10 for me in this grading system in this video, it's going to get you a D. And I give them a D plus because of the teams that finished in that sense. I think that they were on the better end, and they showed some promise, and they were in a tough group. So I'll give them the benefit of the doubt. I'll give them the D plus, but they finished fourth place and they had 1 point. So they're not getting anything higher than a D. Croatia. Um, I've gone for an F, and I'll spoil it. They're the only team that gets an F for me for this tournament. It just wasn't good enough. Not at all. I mean, the attacking play was really, really poor. They never really looked like threatening at all. And then again, on the defensive side of things, it wasn't necessarily anything good either. They gave up more goals against than Albania. They had a worse goal differential than Albania. They lost 3-0 to Spain. Very like I would say like in an embarrassing fashion. They got absolutely torched by them and never really looked like they had anything in the game. And even against Italy at points, like and Albania, like they didn't look special. And when you're a team that's made it to two straight World Cup semifinals and in there also a World Cup final and been there and thereabouts in the international game for a while to come out and have this type of performance when you have a lot of veteran players who know this is their last tournament, it's extremely disappointing. I think that this is almost a worst case result for Croatia going into the tournament. And so for me, I see no other grade to give them but an F because this is not what we've become accustomed to with Croatia. This is not what the fans would have expected. I think that they'll be immensely disappointed. I think the FA will be immensely disappointed. And this is also, a grade that this tournament then rounded out that golden generation for Croatia, and it confirms and finishes off that they didn't get any silverware. So adding that extra negative bit, I think, is just in so many ways a disappointing, negative, sad, goodbye, farewell tournament for them, and that's an F. That's an F. Unfortunately, that's not how you want to go out. It's a failure, and F is the grade that I think is appropriate. For Italy, similar to Croatia, they've gone through. They have. Um, Never impressed by them. Struggle against Albania. Obviously, struggle against Croatia, and then again 1-0 to Spain, but absolutely torched by them. Never looked like they were in the game. The one thing I'll give them on Croatia, defensively, they were stout throughout the tournament. I think that Donnarumma had a great tournament. Obviously, Calafiori put his name on a map here, right? He's getting a lot of looks after the start to the Euros that he had, and the club year that he's had. So defensively, I think things were good. Bastoni also was all right during the tournament, but the midfield was really lacking. There was no real threat ever from Italy on the attacking side of things outside of Federico Chiesa going on a run by himself. So in reality, they were a completely one-dimensional side who never really looked like they had a chance of defending their title. Really disappointing. And with that being said, yeah, they won the last Euro, so there is that high expectation, but they also haven't been good since they won the last Euro. I think they're on their third coach, or that was the coach during the Euros was their third coach since that Euro title. Obviously, they haven't been in either of the last two World Cups, so it's been a down spell for Italy. Despite the fact that there was a Euro. So you got to take both of those into account when you're thinking about, okay, well, what were the expectations? How much did they disappoint? Because obviously they disappointed, but how much of a disappointment was it? I've gone with a C minus. I don't think that many people would have expected them to be putting up much of a fight in a title defense, but I think that they would have expected them to put up more of a fight than what they gave. Really disappointing. No real attacking threat, no real desire, no real organization at all. They looked disorganized. They looked like they didn't have an identity. They didn't know what they were doing. There was lacking chemistry, especially in the attacking third, and it was just slow and sloppy. And that's going to get you a C minus when you go out in the round of 16 and didn't even look too convincing in the group stage. So easy. That's an A plus. They're the best team in the tournament. 7 wins out of 7. All the positives for Spain. Let's think. I think that De La Fuente is a brilliant coach. He has managed to take Spain to the next level without abandoning the past, which I think is often something that's really difficult. When teams transition from one generation to another and you want to have success with both, yeah, you had a style with the last generation and you want to keep your identity to some extent. It's hard to do a complete identity shift, especially when young players are being brought up through that system. But when you bring in a new group of players, you're going to have different talent levels. And we've seen with Spain over the past uh, few years since they went on that Euro World Cup Euro run that they have struggled with the tiki taka, 700 pass you to death style. It hasn't exactly worked for them. So for them to come out in this tournament and in the last Nations League and play a little bit different, very similar, but a little bit different with that speed on the edge, adding a real attacking flair where it's like, yeah, we can possess the ball, but we can also go at any time, and you have to be ready for it. Adding that dynamicism, I really probably butchered that word, but to their system took them to a different level. That was a perfect tournament. Nico Williams, Lamine Yamal, brilliant, did exactly what they wanted to do. Alvaro Morata did what he had to do. He's a hold-up nine who gets some finishes when you need him to. Rodri, I think, is the best player in the world. He's not flashy, he's not a flair guy, but he does his job better than anybody else. I mean, he is the definition of a six. And I think any team would be happy to have him. There's a reason why he's only lost 5 games in the last 3 years and won 8 titles or something like that. I think it's since January of 2023, he has lost 5 games and won 8 trophies for club and country. So he's sensational. Fabian Ruiz came in very good. Dani Olmo off the bench for an injured Pedri might have arguably been player of the tournament if not for Rodri. So special tournament from Spain across the board. Very, very, very little to criticize them for. The one point that I would have, because otherwise I think I'd be giving them 100% A plus, but I'll give them like a 98, 99, because I did see one blemish, one potential flaw, and that was against Germany when they subbed out their threatening attacking players. They lost. So Nico Williams and Lamine Yamal went out in that game, and when they subbed both of those players out, they lost that direct, fast counterattack like ability, and they were almost forced to go back to the death by a thousand passes style. They weren't able to all of a sudden, flick the switch and they're going into attack. They couldn't go so quickly as they had in all of their games, and that's what had killed other teams. So Germany almost was able to come back in that game because of it, and they get what I would consider to be a lucky goal in overtime to win it. But you need a little bit of luck sometimes. Going into the 2026 World Cup, though, I think that the best thing for Spain to do is to keep the system the same and look for somebody who can come off the bench for Nico Williams and Lamine Yamal and play in a similar style. Because if they can do that, they're going to be the team to beat in 2026. For Serbia, I think they're another team. It's hard to say. I don't really know what I think the Serbian expectations were low going into the tournament. I had higher expectations for them than what they achieved. I thought they might finish second in the group and make it through, but they've come out with 2 draws, fair 2 draws against Slovenia and Denmark. They got a result against the 2 lesser teams behind England in the group. So to some extent, like it's not too disappointing of a tournament. They only gave up 2 goals all tournament, but they only scored 1. So attacking play was obviously lacking. I thought that Mitrovic and Milinkovic Savic, who play together in Saudi Arabia, would combine better. I thought Vlahovic would have a better tournament as well. And neither of those things happened. The chemistry didn't look to be there between Mitrovic and Milinkovic Savic, and Vlahovic didn't really impress me too much. So, they get the one result in that draw against Slovenia with a last minute goal. But other than that, disappointing tournament. But I'm not sure how much more they would have expected from the tournament. So we've gone ahead and we're going to give them a D. It could have been worse for sure, but it definitely could have been better. So I think that a D is a fair one. And obviously, I think it becomes obvious. 3rd and 4th place teams, I have less to say because they didn't play as much in the tournament, so there's less to talk about with that. But just saying, because I went on and on about Spain and Serbia was like 2 minutes. So Slovenia, I've given them an A. I think that's a deserved grade because the expectations going into the tournament were not what they achieved. And when you look at it, they managed 4 draws out of 4. They tied England They tied Denmark. They tied Serbia. That's 3 teams better than them that they got a point against. 3 teams that would be better than them in the FIFA rankings. If you looked at their rosters on paper, they'd be better than them. If you looked at where their players play their domestic leagues, if you look at the form of their players, all of it, they would be the worst team. And yet they managed to get 3 draws out of 3. And then they took Portugal all the way to a shootout and lost on the shootout. But that counts as a draw as well. So that's 4 draws out of 4 for the tournament. Undefeated tournament for Slovenia. A team that we really didn't really expect that much of. I think the defense was outstanding throughout the tournament, headed by goalkeeper Jan Oblak, who unfortunately that's probably his last hurrah for Slovenia. But what a way to go out for him. Um, as their goalkeeper, as their number one, saving a penalty from Cristiano Ronaldo, even if it's a game that you end up losing on penalties. What an absolute way to stamp your legacy out for your national team. And I think I would have wanted to see a little bit more from Šeško, but I do think that Šeško and Sporar really combined well in the attack. It didn't result in as many goals as maybe I expected or other people expected. But when you look at the tournament as a whole, their defensive record was amazing. They only allowed 2 goals in 4 games. That's sensational. And for a team as small and as new to the big stage as Slovenia, that's a great result. I don't think that they will be looking at 2026 with much hope, because I think that is it for Jan Oblak. And I think he is the most important player on that team by far. But I think that I wouldn't rule it out. They will definitely fight. And if they can find a goalkeeper who's half as good as Oblak, that they'll be a decent side, because they were built really well strategically and defensively, and it showed throughout the tournament, because it wasn't just Jan Oblak as much as he was sensational for them. For Denmark, it's an interesting thing, because when you look at their recent performances in major tournaments, excluding maybe the last World Cup, they've been really solid. Really surprised people at times. Really gone out and made some big statements with how they've performed in these tournaments. But then people expected them to do more in 2022, and they got grouped. So going into this tournament, there were kind of mixed expectations. I think some people were like, "Yeah, Denmark's going to get back to that old way of playing that they have had in previous major tournaments." And some people like me were like, "Yeah, 2022 is the sign that times are changing. They've gotten older. Kjær is older. Eriksen is older. Schmeichel's older. That's their big 3, right? And even beyond that, Delaney, Poulsen. There's a lot of really talented players that Højbjerg. They're all kind of aging out. They're not getting minutes for their club teams anymore, and the young group coming in isn't the biggest name guys, and they didn't bring up that many. They still brought Delaney, and they still brought Poulsen, and they still brought these older guys who didn't really play much, and in the end took spots that a younger generation could have gotten experience using those spots. But so I, going into the tournament, didn't expect much from them, but I could also see a world where somebody did. And so for them to get 3 points, 3 draws, good in the group, maybe, get the draw against England was something they'd probably be happy with, but then drawing with Slovenia and Serbia, probably disappointed. And then you lose to Germany 2-0, but it's a game where, a matter of inches away, and I'm not going to argue with the calls, but inches away from going ahead, and instead you're down 1-0 in a matter of 30 seconds to a minute. So and in that game, Germany really started poorly, and Denmark really had the opportunity to take that game and seize it with both hands, and have themselves a quarterfinal matchup with Spain. They were unlucky, like I said, inches away. But with all that being said, and how close they came to going further, I'll give them a B minus. Obviously, not the best, considering how they've performed in other tournaments in recent history. Obviously, Euro in 2021, the 2020 Euro was a semifinal appearance for them, and this is no semifinal appearance, and they didn't look anywhere near as good on the ball, off the ball, or just as a whole. But they're older. The team is not the same. I don't think they're as good a team on paper as they were in 2020. And they made a round of 16, and they put up a fight against the host Germany. So I'm going to give them a B minus. I think it's above what people expected. So we above what their predicted or average performance would be, their mean performance. So they maybe slightly exceeded expectations, but not too much. So we'll take them from the C. We'll bump them to that B minus, but we're not going to push them any further. England's an interesting team because they've gone to the final, but they've lost the final, and expectations have been for a long time that they need to win silverware, and they continue to not be able to win silverware. And they played poorly throughout the entirety of the tournament. It never really looked easy. It never really looked pretty. And I think throughout the tournament, not only did it not look pretty, but I think some teams, when France play to some extent, it's like, okay, it doesn't look pretty, but this is what France is trying to do, right? They're trying to set up defensively. I think that's similar with like Turkey, right? Okay, it's not pretty, but that's what they're trying to do. That's how they're trying to play. That's not how England were trying to play. The attacking side of the ball was just it was they couldn't get it figured out. And I think when you look at the game against Spain, it's kind of a showing of I don't know. It's hard to say, and maybe when you talk about the Dutch game as well, right? The Dutch game was a game where finally they played the type of team that they wanted to play. Wait, maybe wait. Whoa. What am I saying? Okay, scratch that. England set up really defensively, and I've said this before that the English attackers, these four in particular, all like to come back and receive the ball to feet rather than getting balls in behind. It's fine, but they're all taking up each other's space. I think Saka ends up having the best tournament out of the four of them because he's the best equipped and found ways to get himself involved, not going into that same space. But these three were getting in each other's way consistently. And with Kane, you ask questions of injury, right? But these two specifically, Bellingham and Foden, I really think that only one of them could have a decent performance at a time. And when Bellingham was all right, Foden kind of sucked. And when Foden had his good game against the Dutch, Bellingham kind of ghosted, right? So I think part of the problem was that there were too many cooks in the kitchen, too many players trying to do the same job. And then, obviously there's the insane amount of pressure that comes with playing for England. And when you mix all those things together alongside a defensive structure, players are going to be afraid to take chances and be direct. And I think that's what happened a lot with England. They had a lot of possession, but they didn't do a lot with it. They didn't make a lot of shots. They didn't make a lot of chances. There weren't a lot of goal scoring opportunities. And this is why, I don't think Cole Palmer necessarily is more technical or more talented than any of these four, but I think he should have started over one of these four because of the fact that he brought something different. And that something different is confidence and a continued ability to be direct. He's never phased. No matter how defensive England wants to play, no matter how much other players are taking up his space, he is going to find the ball, take it forward, and take chances, for better or for worse. But in an England team where you had three guys who were dropping back and passing backwards consistently, Foden for a while, and maybe till the end, had more passes to Pickford than to Kane. That's not a winning recipe. But when you put Palmer in, yeah, he's going to give the ball away more, maybe. And maybe that's not something Southgate wants, but he brought an extra energy to the team. I think Kobe Minu did a similar job in midfield. He found a way to connect Declan Rice from the 6 position to Jude Bellingham in the 10 and to the attacking players. He formed that connection between attack and defense that was lacking throughout a lot of the tournament, where it's like it felt, at least in the beginning of the tournament, it felt like everybody had to be a defender first, right? When Kobe Mainu comes in, I think it freed up a lot of or some of these four to at points be only attacking players, which was better for them. I think when you look at things as a whole, the type of team that England wants to play is Spain. That's who England built their team to beat in a sense. They're defensive. They'll take and soak in your pressure like they did against Spain for 45 minutes, and no, they will not break. And they are in theory, in this system that Southgate has tried to run, they should be extremely good on the counter, right? And so it should be a situation of, we're going to take all this pressure from Spain and we're going to hit you on the break. And to some extent, I think it worked against Spain. Yeah, they allowed the goal. Um, I think that has more to do with Spain. Um, I think that in that situation, and this is kind of a tangent, but analyzing that goal a little bit, and I think it's the reason you see Nico Williams and Lamine Yamal switched for a little bit in the first half. I think that's because Lamine Yamal, similar to these four, he likes to come back and receive the ball to feet and then turn and face defenders. While Nico Williams likes to use his speed, he wants the ball a little bit ahead of him or in his stride so that he can take players on right away. And so when Nico Williams was on the left going up against Kyle Walker, who was sat back defensively the whole time, he was consistently, being met in a one-on-one, and he was winning them. But the problem with Lamine Yamal was the way he was playing, where he's coming back to receive the ball in midfield. It was allowing Luke Shaw to get very far forward because Shaw then doesn't have to get all the way back defensively because Lamine Yamal isn't all the way forward. To start the second half, brilliant tactical decision by Lamine Yamal, and I'm assuming De La Fuente, because England goes forward, Shaw goes forward, and Lamine Yamal firmly plants himself even with the center backs. And even though Shaw busts his ass to get back defensively, that ball still gets played behind Shaw. Lamine Yamal gets it with Shaw on his back and is able to cut across in front of him, putting him in a situation where he either has to foul or let him go. He lets him go and he finds the pass. So that right there, I don't think is a blemish on England defensively. I think that's a brilliant Spain tactical decision. So the one goal, brilliant Spain decision. I still think to that point, England's structure, their game plan is working for that final. They're losing, they're losing, but they bring on a Cole Palmer who adds that extra aspect and he scores, right? That's what England have been trying to do all tournament. Absorb pressure, keep the score as low as possible, and score when they have these opportunities with their attacking players. And they did exactly that. Yeah, they got beat because of a brilliant Spain decision, but they were able to prepare for it. They kept themselves in the game. They didn't let it become 2 or 3, right? They kept themselves there. They had a 0-0 first half. They made it close, and then they got their goal, which throughout the tournament, they were getting their goal at some point. It was only one most of the time, but they were getting it, right? So they kept it close. They did what they needed to do. They score the goal. They're right back in the game. And then they didn't know what to do. And I think this is where the rest of the tournament became a problem for England. Like I just said, England is a team that's built to play against attacking teams. They had a Mickey Mouse run to the final where they played only teams that wanted to sit back defensively, and it was really difficult for them. I think if they had played the likes of Austria, they would have had a better performance than they did against Slovakia. Even though I think Austria is a better team, I think that suits England's style more. But they kept playing teams that wanted to do exactly what they did, and England were forced into a position where they had to take the game to the other team, something that they weren't necessarily comfortable with and didn't necessarily fit the styles of four players who want to receive the ball with their backs to goal. These four want to counter. They don't want to build an attack in possession. So it wasn't what they wanted to do. I mean, you can look at it and like Kane's a poacher. He's a great finisher and he's a great hold up player. So he doesn't really want to play a possession style where he's having to do too much of that. Saka, he likes the ball to feet. Bellingham plays for Real Madrid. They're the counterattack capital, right? Like so. I think it's clear that like that's not what those players wanted to do. But they were winning these games because when it came down to it, they had more talent. And in the end, once they found that equalizer and they broke through and they finally did it, no matter how hard it was, they found the equalizer and then they kept pushing. The problem is that the way they played at the end of those games is the way they should have played the whole of those games. Take it to them, be aggressive, be attacking, and they couldn't get it. It took them so long to get it figured out in every game, but it was winning them games because they were winning it late, right? Then you get up against Spain, where you can actually get your system to work, and instead of scoring that goal to equalize and going right back into their system that has been working all game, the only goal you've allowed was a brilliantly worked goal by Spain. That's the only goal you've allowed. And instead of saying, you know what, we're going to keep going with what's working, they tried to keep going on the attacking, something that they struggled with all tournament against much weaker opponents. So my question is, why? Why? You have been great defensively. England allowed one goal in the entirety of the group stage. One goal. They allowed one goal to Slovakia. They allowed one goal to Switzerland. Oh, how did they do against the Dutch? I don't remember the score. One goal against the Dutch, right? They consistently very, very good defensively. And yet, when it came down to it in a final, they switched up and they tried to do something that they had struggled with all tournament. I understand and I think that England should be an attacking team with the players that they have. But when you've spent your entire tournament and probably your entire prep and probably just years under Southgate learning how to play a defensive system and a defensive style, and now all of a sudden in the final of the Euros, you're like, let's not do everything we practice every single game and every single practice and every single training camp, and let's try to do something different. You're going to lose, especially when you're up against a team like Spain. And they punished them. And when you look at the goal, yeah, when England got scored against at points in this during this tournament, it was not pretty. It was on the counter because England were forcing the ball on the attack. When you look at the goal that Slovakia scored, Ivan Strands, they're forcing the ball forward. They got counterattacked on. It's exactly what happened with Spain. They're forcing the ball forward and they're putting too many numbers into the attack, and they don't know how to defend from the front, and they get counterattacked on. They were not prepared to play that way, and for some reason they switched from their defensive style to a different style. I don't like their defensive style, but stick with what you know. Don't try something new. The place to learn new tactics is not the final of the Euro. So with all that being said, all of that, Southgate's gone. I hope they get an attacking coach so that that problem doesn't come for them. But all that being said, I'm giving them a B. They made the final. Fair play to them. They showed a lot of heart. Their players found ways to win despite their poor form, and they showed like very, very good mental toughness and strength and desire and chemistry with each other. Not in the sense of good passing, but just like a brotherhood between them. All things that are great. That gets them a B. The fact that they get to a final gets them a B. But England's expectations are higher, and they didn't perform very well. They didn't look pretty to watch. This like they were winning games by means other than playing good soccer, and they didn't win the championship. And so for me, championship good performance, that's an A+ for England. Okay, championship not a good performance, that's an A. Loss in the final, that takes you down a grade for them, so they're going to get that B. Oh man, Poland, nothing special really. And I said it before, fourth place teams that can't get 3 points, you're not going to get above a D. You're getting a D+ Poland. Lewandowski was hurt for the first two games. He only came on late in the second game, and by the time he's getting a start, they're already out and done. And their best game was a game that they were already out and done in, and I think they played pretty well in that game against France, which is why they get a D+ and not something less. And also having to deal with a Lewandowski, your best player, being injured. I'm giving you the benefit of the doubt. You're not a D-. You're not an F team. But again, you're fourth place in your group, and you've only got 1 point. You've played 3 games. You've scored 3. You've allowed 6. It's not a great showing from them, and it's hard to argue that they should get anything more than a D+. The Dutch are, I'm going to say, very similar to England. They have a coach who I don't think plays the right system for his players. It's the same thing I think with England. I don't think the system England or the Netherlands play is what would be best for the group of players that they have. But just like England, they showed a tremendous amount of mental toughness, tremendous amount of confidence and heart to make it to a semifinal. And they had less talent than England had and weren't expected to do as well as England did. So yeah, the performance wasn't there, and that takes them down a notch. But or the attractive performance. They didn't win games because they were playing good soccer. They won games because they were working hard off the ball, and they were giving it everything. Right? They weren't winning games because it was beautiful tiki taka perfect soccer or a stout stout midfield and long ping ball. Like they didn't have a true style like that. They had heart and they put the ball in the back of the net when they needed to, right? So it wasn't pretty. That takes you down a point or two because you know it is easier to win games when you play with a tactical style, when you play with a true identity. And they did not. I think they lacked a true identity. And I think even the identity that they tried to do wasn't the most fitting. When you look at it and you say Ian Matson and Jeremy Frimpong barely played at all between the two of them throughout the entirety of the tournament, that's really disappointing. That's two of their best players. So you take that and you say, okay, I don't think the system was right. So you're going to lose points from a coaching standpoint because the system wasn't right. But I think the players gave their all and they did what they could to make the system work. And they made a semifinal in a system that realistically wasn't best for them. And for that, they're going to get an A minus. And honestly, if it weren't for the coach, it might be an A plus. It genuinely might be an A plus if it weren't for the fact that I don't think their coach knows how to coach their team. France is an interesting one. They finished second in the group. That's losing points for a French team. They scored once from open play themselves. They had 2 own goals in their favor and a penalty shot, and then 1 goal from, I believe it was Kolo Muani in the semifinal against Spain, and that's it. And Spain, to be honest, handled them. Again, close game, but that second half, Spain. I mean, it just shows how tactically prepared Spain were. They shut them down, whether it was with a defensive system or possession. Spain shut France down in that second half. So with France, you know, they've gone to a semifinal, and for most teams, that's going to get you a good grade. But the expectation for France going into the tournament, even though they did poorly last year, is championship. And anything less is considered a disappointment because they were in the World Cup finals and they won the World Cup before that. And they are probably, on paper, the best team in the world. So a semifinal is a disappointment. A semifinal is a good result for the Dutch. It's a good result for the majority of teams in the tournament. It's not a good result for France. That's a disappointing result for France. And the performance was disappointing. Defensively, brilliant, and they always are under Deschamps. I wish they played a little bit more attacking, but it wins them a lot of games, so you can't say too much. But the attacking presence wasn't there at all. I was hearing advertisements before the tournament. France, we play defensive, and when we get a chance to score, we always take it. They did not take it. They had so many shots. There were games where they had shots on shots on shots on shots, no goals, no shots on target often. So to be set up in that way, and it's just it's disappointing for them. So I think you got to look at it for them and say it's not at all. Yeah.
For the tacos, would you like a bowl or a plate?
A plate.
Okay.
Okay, dinner soon, I guess. Tacos. Woohoo. It's not at all what they wanted. It's not at all what they wanted. And I've said it before that it seems for some reason they struggle in Euros. I think there's 2 potential reasons that attacking they struggle in Euros. Either they don't play well against European teams, which I don't think is true because they did beat Belgium and they did beat Croatia and they did beat England in the last 2 World Cups, and those were teams that were absolutely at the top of their games when France beat them. So I don't think that's the case. I do think it's more that they're in a transitionary period and they're trying to figure out how their attack needs to work now. I don't think Griezmann on the right wing or left wing is the right decision, and I don't think Thuram should have been getting as many minutes as he had, considering that he was playing and starting and playing the majority of every game and not scoring. And he's a 9. He needs to be scoring. If you're not scoring as a 9, even if it's a confidence issue, that's fine. We're taking you out. We need to try something else, especially if you're France. You need the goals. And with Olivier Giroud on the bench, I was shocked that Thuram got as many minutes as he did. when he continued to struggle. Dembele needed to be in the game a lot more. He was so dynamic, and so for me, I think it's twofold that they disappointed in results, and there were coaching mistakes that I think were easily fixable in the attacking third. Defensively, perfect, right? But for France, they've got high standards. That's a disappointing tournament. I don't think French people are like, wow, you guys remember Euro 2024? French people are, if you ask them about Euro 2024, it's going to be a disappointing tournament. If you ask the Dutch about Euro 2024, ecstatic. If you ask the French, disappointing tournament. They both went out at the same stage. So C plus for them because they have higher standards. For a lot of other teams, this would be an A plus performance, but for France, it's not. It's a C plus. The winner of Group D was Austria. They're kind of the opposite of France. I loved the way they played. Their coach had it down to a T, and then the results didn't continue as much as oh my goodness, I'm getting raided. My dog's in here now. Wow. Hi, buddy. It's his birthday. Mr. Steve turned 2. What was I saying? Austria, really good. I love Ralph Ragnick. I think watching this Euro made me love Austria because I love the way they played. High press, very fit team, worked very hard, a lot of heart, a lot of passion, a lot of desire. But then there was also a system behind it. There was no unnecessary running. Everything was organized. Everything was planned. They were all bought in, and that's a hard system to play. So it's a credit to the players and a credit to the manager that they were able to do so with such success. But they lose to Turkey in the round of 16, and they were a dark horse team, and I think that they would have been projected to beat Turkey. So as much as I think the performance was great, and then they've won their group, which is great, they could have gone further. So I can't give them that much. I'm going to give them a B plus. It was between a B plus and an A minus, to be honest. I could have given them an A minus, but we're going to go with the B plus. I think it was a great tournament for them, but I think Austria should have higher standards than round of 16 at this point. I think that they need to be considering themselves, and I'm considering them as one of the top 10 teams in Europe right now. So as a top, I mean, who else? Let's go through this tournament. I'm grading them right now, right? So they're not better than Germany, and they're not better than Switzerland, but they might be very soon. It depends on that. They're not better than Spain. I think at this point in time, you can say they're better than Italy or Croatia, and I skipped Hungary and Scotland and now Albania. They're not better than England. That puts us at 4 teams better than them, but they're better than Denmark, Slovenia, and Serbia. They're not better than France. That gives them 5. And I'll give it to the Dutch. They're not better than the Dutch, but they are better than Poland. They're better than everybody in Group E, and they're not better than Portugal. So that puts us at 7. So I'd say Austria are the 8th best team in the tournament. They weren't able to make it to the quarterfinals and show that. So, I am saying that I think they're a better team than Turkey, just by the way. But yeah, so B plus, great performance, but I think they should have higher standards, and I think that when they are in the World Cup in 2026, they will make it out of their group and potentially win around a 32 game. They are my dark horse moving forward until Ralph Ragnick leaves because that Red Bull system he built is ingrained in the blood of Austria now. Oh my gosh, that's like the perfect way you could start have a new national team program. They so lucky that so many of their players play in that Red Bull system which Ralph Ragnick basically created because all of them have this DNA in tactics that is man-made, handmade for Ralph Ragnick. It's like a fairy tale situation for building a national team, right? So B plus. I think that they could have been better, and I think they should be happy about the tournament, but they also should have a little bit of disappointment. Or like we could have done better. We could have done what we will do better, right? Happy about it because you've had a good tournament, you've played well, but also that like we almost did better. We could do better. We will do better, right? Pushing them forward. So Ukraine finished fourth, but they're on 4 points. So they don't fall into that D category. Everybody in this group is on 4 points. And in reality, Ukraine goes out because of that first game. And you got to give them the benefit of the doubt here. It's their first major tournament performance since Russia's invasion. That's their first game in a major tournament since the Russian invasion. And that's a tough thing to deal with. So it's not an easy situation for Ukraine. I think in that first game, maybe the emotions got the better of them because Romania completely dismantled them. But then they come back and they tie against Belgium and they beat Slovakia. So they did what they needed to do to go through. They're just unfortunate because in the end, what keeps them from going through is the goal differential from that first game. So it's really that first game that does it for them. I don't think that they should be super disappointed in this tournament. I think that they should be disappointed that they didn't go further, but I'm giving them a C as an expected result because 4 points in that group is a fair way to go. And I think if they had been told you're going to get 4 points out of this group beforehand, that they would have been like, okay, we might be going through. We'll take it. We'll take it. So in hindsight, it sucks for them, right? But um, it's not a terrible performance. It wasn't a good performance, but it wasn't a terrible performance. We give them a C. We give them a C. Slovakia, very similar to Slovenia. I'm giving them an A. Totally exceeded expectations. I thought they'd be the worst team in the tournament. Ivan Stranz finishes as joint top goal scorer. Sensational breakout tournament for him. A lot of guys on this Slovakian team had great performances, and you come out game one and you beat Belgium. It's a great way to start your tournament, and then you honestly should have beaten England. I mean, that's another game where you're like, England could have gotten knocked out right there. Last second equalizer from Jude Bellingham in insane fashion. I mean, I thought that was it for England at that point. So for Slovakia to come that close to an upset in the round of 16 and being a quarterfinal team going up against Switzerland, I mean, that would have been an A plus, right? I think you could argue that they should have an A plus anyway. Expectations were low. The names on the team sheet aren't as powerful as some of the names for the other teams. So for them to perform the way they did at this tournament, I think they should be absolutely ecstatic, and they should be working to build on what they started here. I'm giving them an A, and I think that's a fair grade. Belgium, on the other hand, I'm going to give them a C. I think it very disappointing. Um, De Bruyne, they tried to play him in that Rodri Xhaka role, and they tried to play him in the 10 role. But the reality is, with Belgium, they don't have the 8, the box to box midfielder to connect. They don't have Andrik that Germany has, and they don't have Fabian Ruiz or Danny Olmo, Fabian Ruiz, Pedri that Spain has to make that connection. So, I think they became very divided at times. And when De Bruyne dropped back to 6, he got the ball a lot, but there wasn't a lot of options going forward, and he had no connecting option in an 8. And when he was at the 10, he didn't get the ball enough, and they didn't have enough going forward attackingly. I think Doku really started the tournament great. And if they had been able to keep up that momentum with Doku, I think that the tournament could have looked a little different. But he's gone and made a mistake in the first 10 minutes or 20 minutes of the first game that gives away a goal. And no matter how well you're playing, that's going to hurt your ego. So I think they miss out there. In honesty, I don't know how much more we would have expected from this Belgium team at this point. It's disappointing. It's disappointing for them. Their golden generation's done. But what more did we expect? I mean, they finished with 4 points in the group. Maybe we expected more, but they gave France a better battle than I probably would have expected them to. So I think it evens out, and that's about the tournament I would have expected. So it's disappointing for them because I think a lot of people were maybe hoping that golden generation showed up, even though nobody was really expecting it. But that's it for them, and I think that they will be even worse going forward because they're just going to continue to lose people, and it doesn't seem like they have too many great options coming in to replace players. especially like nobody is filling that 8 role right now, and they were basically playing with a line of 4 up front and a back of 5 and one guy in the middle who couldn't connect everything, and he needs to be able to do that. So I'm giving him a C. Romania is, for me, the exact same situation as Austria, so they get the exact same grade. Um, Great performance. I think the team played really well. Difference is the expectations weren't there as much for them as I think they would have been for Austria, which would have bumped them up to an A minus for surprising, but they were kind of beaten down by the Dutch. So it brings them back to a B plus because they never really had a chance of winning that round of 16 game. Well, Austria almost did, right? So very similar to them tactically. I thought they were great. I think they played very similarly in a tactical sense, and I do think they played the Dutch well. They had the run of play at times. They were just unlucky that they didn't take their chances and score goals, because if they had scored when the run of play was with them, instead of letting the Dutch score against the run of play, it's a 1-0 game instead of 1-0 the other way. And then you have the run of play and the ball, and you can sit back, and the Dutch aren't going to get you on the counterattack, and you might just be able to hold that for the rest of the game. So for them, I think they played well all tournament, but they ended up getting destroyed in that game. But they're another team similar to Austria. I think they will be in the 2026 World Cup. They're too good not to be. I mean, they were really that game against Ukraine was amazing the way they played. And if they can find a way to play that way consistently, they're gonna be really special for a really long time. Um, they're another team that I say like might be I don't think they're quite top 10, but they might be pushing right on the edge. So yeah, I think they're another team to look out for in the coming years. Moving on to the Czech Republic, they fired their coach the day after they qualified for the tournament, and they barely had time with their coach. And in the end, that's kind of what it looks like, because the only way that they ever seemed dangerous was from set pieces, and that includes long throw-ins. It was more like watching an NFL game than a Euro game, but they showed heart and they showed dedication, and they worked really hard, and they played really well defensively. They took a lead against Portugal. They played Turkey really close, and they got a draw against Georgia. So really close to different results. But in the end, again, it's another team that finishes fourth place with less than 3 points. It's only 2 for them. So I just don't think that I can give them anything more than a D. But they're definitely on the higher end of. And if I had to pick all the teams that I've given D or below grades to, Czech Republic is the best of them. So Georgia, easy A plus. Nobody expected that at all, and they played Spain well. I think Spain again, tactically got them figured out, something that other teams hadn't really been able to do. But they beat Portugal. They've gone through to the knockout stages, even if it's a weakened Portugal side. They showed real energy. They didn't back down. A lot of teams, when they're first new to a tournament, they like to sit back defensively. They refuse to do so. They worked hard off the ball, hard on the ball. They were quick, fast, and I think it's a testament to the fact that they have been trying to make a major tournament for a long time. It's not just, oh, we got a golden generation suddenly and we're just throwing them together into a tournament. I think when teams do that, that's when you have less success than what Georgia have. Georgia have built their system through their national team slowly over time. They've done the hard work. They've built the foundation. This is not a fluke. This is Georgia really becoming a strong national team. Mamardashvili, great tournament. Um, I think Dadashvili in the first game was awesome. Kvaratskhelia, awesome. So just I think a great tournament from them. Oh my goodness, this is like the loudest stuff out there. Things I've ever had for one of these videos. But for me, it's an absolute A plus. And I think they've reached their goal probably a little sooner. They just made their first ever major tournament, and they're straight to the knockout phases, right? Um, I think that they're a team that could challenge for a World Cup in 2026. So I think they could. I really think they could. And I'm happy. I'm happy to watch them play. They're entertaining. They're progressive. Um, they pass the eye test for me. And again, I can't emphasize this enough. They're if you go and look into what they've done over the last 8 to 10 years in trying to build their FA and build their program in the country, amazing. It is a absolute clinic in how to take your national team from 0 to 100 real quick. Absolute clinic. That is how you build a team at the national level. I have no notes. I have no notes. It's like, and you'd be like, oh, well, they could have gone further. Anybody could have gone further in this. That's not what this is about. For what this Georgia team has and what this Georgia team has done in the past, this is exceeds all expectations. Absolute perfect, 100% best grade in the tournament. Done. Right. So for me, it's an easy A plus. Turkey, kind of similar, except for the fact that I think they're further in this development, and they also have a few more talented players. So I think that the flaws that you can pick out flaws with anybody, but when I pick out flaws with Georgia, it's like, okay, well, what else are they going to do? Like I don't I like yeah, they have flaws, but I don't think that realistically they should have these flaws figured out. Some of the flaws that Turkey had, I do think they should have figured out. But I'm giving them an A minus. I think yeah. Great tournament. Really, really special performance to go as far as they did. People were worried about going into the tournament. They play with a lot of passion and energy, and sometimes that hurts them. They get too aggressive, too emotional, and I think you can see that with Demiral after that game and getting suspended for you know encouraging and supporting a genocide is basically what his celebration was. So, overly emotional, but that's one example. I'm not going to punish them for one player. They held their emotions in check. They played off the back of the fans. I think the one thing that I would say is because they became too one dimensional once they figured out that Arda Güler and Çalhanoğlu were special from set pieces, and people could like really struggle against that. They became too one dimensional and they tried to rely on it too much. That's why they lost to the Dutch in large part, because they stopped trying to play against them in the way that they had. Go away.
It's dinner.
I don't care. Um, so, wow, that's I'm 20 years old and I let me home for the summer, but whatever. So they became too one dimensional, and then I think also um, I lost my train of thought. A minus. Move on to Portugal. They're the last one. Apparently, I have to go to dinner. Right, I'm trying to hurry up. Um, I think for me, and I've said this time and time again, the biggest issue is Ronaldo hasn't learned how to play as not the best player on his team. He insists upon being the best player, and nobody on his team has, I guess, the bravery to try and to push him off of that. I think that's why they performed so well in Qatar when he was on the bench, because everybody felt more free to do things. When he's on the field, they're forced to go through him. I think at times in the tournament, especially against like Turkey, he figured out a way to not play as the focal point, and that Portugal clearly played better when he did that. And I think specifically offensively, they played better when he did that. But later in the tournament, he insisted upon being the focal point, and it's you see that he's the 40-year-old star, one of the greatest players of all time, if not the greatest. I'd say he's the second best player of all time, and he's crying after missing a penalty shootout in the Euro. Great, he's emotional. We know what it means to him, but he's the captain of his team. He has young players looking up to him, and these players are having to encourage him rather than focusing on their fact. João Felix should not be having to go up to Ronaldo and be like, you're all right, when he knows that he's been subbed on and is going to have to take a penalty, right? So mentally, I think he let his team down and tried to be the focal point too much, but that takes nothing away from his legacy. I just think he hasn't he has been a one-dimensional player his whole career. It is always I am the guy, play through me with Cristiano Ronaldo, and Messi has found other ways to do it. Right, Messi doesn't have to be the guy for his team to win. I think Ronaldo doesn't know how to play that secondary role, and it's hurt Portugal. I think that they'll be better in the future without Ronaldo, or better in the future if Ronaldo can learn how to play more of a team player role. But I've gone with a B for them because of the fact that I think that you know sky's the limit for them. Their national team is extremely talented, and with their current manager Martinez, they could have won the Euros if not for you know just some what I would call almost internal issues uh, because of I guess unfortunately I'd say the ego of Cristiano Ronaldo, and I don't think it's like oh he's such an ass. Like it's not something like that. It's more like he doesn't know how else to play. That's how he's played his entire career. So it's unfortunate. It's an unfortunate way for him to go out with them. Review of all the grades there, and I have to go to dinner. So this has been Salibo Football. There are all your grades. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you in the next one.